The last photo on my phone shows our white-trimmed porch at dusk. The same porch I found empty, the paint already peeling, when I came home with Lily's. I grew up in a cul-de-sac outside Portland, the kind of neighborhood where mailboxes leaned toward one another like gossiping grandmothers and every dog knew which fences it could slip through. Dad taught middle school science. Mom managed a tiny bakery that smelled of cinnamon even in July. On weekends we chased garage sales, hunting for future heirlooms none of us really needed. My little sister, Anna, taped Polaroids to her ceiling so the first thing she saw each morning was proof that we were together. Until college, I'd never slept anywhere but the sky-blue room at the top of the stairs. Even after I left for Oregon State, only a 90-minute drive. Mom texted every Sunday, "Call when you get in, honey. I'll worry until I hear your voice." Dad forwarded goofy articles about tardigrades surviving in space. Anna stuffed envelopes with candy hearts that melted before they reached my dorm. Every break I returned to the same dinner table argument about whether the cat was fat or merely big-furred. It was ordinary, maybe boring, and I held it like a seashell against my ear whenever campus felt too loud. Looking back, there were microcracks. Mom's late-night flour orders spiked, as if she was baking more than she could sell. Dad started locking his desk drawer and changed computer passwords on a sticky note he carried in his wallet. Anna's Polaroids turned from family snapshots to abstract shots of cloudy skies, as though she'd run out of things worth preserving indoors. But I chalked it up to stress, midlife restlessness, normal tides no one talks about. Spring semester of my junior year, finals week swallowed me whole. I missed 3 Sunday calls in a row, replying with rushed emojis and promises to call tomorrow. When I finally slid the bouquet of lilies onto the passenger seat and pointed my battered Civic toward home, the radio played our old road trip anthem by sheer coincidence. I remember laughing at the timing, imagining Mom opening the front door with flour on her cheek, Dad's lecture on safe driving queued up behind her, Anna's shriek that lilies triggered her fake allergies. Instead, the porch was empty. The house was hollow, windows stripped of curtains. And Mrs. Daly, the neighbor who once slipped cinnamon rolls through our fence, stood on her lawn like she'd been waiting for me. She didn't say hello. She only pressed her lips together and whispered, "They moved out last month, sweetheart. Didn't they tell you?" The lilies wilted in my fist, dripping pollen onto my jeans. A chill pushed through the late May sun. For the first time in my life, I wasn't certain the key in my pocket opened anything at all. I pushed past Mrs. Daly and rattled the doorknob anyway. The key turned, but the hinge groaned empty. Inside, sun-bleached rectangles marked where furniture had been. A single nail still clutched Anna's Polaroid of a thunderhead. Its edges curled like it had tried to crawl away. On the kitchen counter lay a final water bill addressed to occupant. No forwarding address. No note. Only a stamp-through red word, paid, that felt like a verdict on me. I called Mom first. "The number you've reached is no longer in service." Dad's phone rang twice, then switched to a generic voicemail, his voice replaced by the faceless drone of the carrier. Anna's social feeds were wiped, profile picture gone, username deleted. It was as if someone had scrubbed the internet with steel wool until every trace of my family flaked off. I drove to the bakery, praying for the cinnamon-sweet air that meant home. The shop windows were papered over. A realtor's sign swung in the wind, phone number scribbled in Sharpie. Under contract, no tours. My chest hollowed. I pressed my forehead to the glass, tasting metal in every breath. That night, I slept in the Civic behind the town library, hugging the bouquet of dead lilies like an anchor. At dawn, I tried campus police, maybe an accident report, a hospital record. Nothing. I phoned hospitals, county jails, even the morgue desk. No matches. Each polite denial stripped another layer of disbelief until raw fear shone through. A week later, an unmarked envelope slipped under my dorm door. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper. "We know what you did. Do not contact us. Do not come looking." The signature wasn't Mom's looping cursive or Dad's block letters. It was Anna's tight, slanted scrawl. "We know what you did." What had I done? I replayed the last semester frame by frame. Skipped Sunday calls? Borrowed $200 from Dad's emergency fund? He'd insisted. Sent Anna lecture notes for her community college biology class. Nothing criminal, nothing cruel. Unless forgetting to call home was a capital offense. Panic metastasized into shame. Had I missed some crisis? Some plea for help? I combed email archives until sunrise. That's when I found the bakery's QuickBooks export dad had asked me to double-check for tax errors over spring break. I compared columns, fixed decimal points, then forwarded it back. Now I opened the file fresh and saw an error my bleary eyes had missed. A duplicated expense block that turned a $4,700 shortfall into a $47,000 one. In fixing the decimals, I'd accidentally saved that version to the accountant, the bank, the Small Business Administration loan officer. $47,000. Enough to trigger loan default, foreclose the shop, and vaporize the house they'd mortgaged twice to keep ovens running. My help had detonated their lives. Had they ever tried to call me after the mistake surfaced? Or did they assume malicious intent, believing their honor student son forged numbers to hurt them? The envelope's warning suggested conviction, not confusion. They judged me, sentenced me, and vanished. I sent 60 emails in 2 days. Apologies, spreadsheets, desperate explanations. All bounced back. I wired the last $1,100 of my scholarship stipend to the bakery's closed account, a gesture swallowed by the void. Nothing came in return except silence thick enough to smother thought. And so the betrayal didn't strike like a lightning bolt. It unfolded like suffocation. Slow, invisible, inescapable. I hadn't stolen a cent, yet my mistake had branded me thief, saboteur, exile. And the people who taught me to tell the truth never gave me the chance to speak it. Grief is loud the first week. After that, it whispers until you start answering back. I stopped going to lectures because every fluorescent-lit classroom looked like a courtroom and every whisper behind me sounded like there's the kid who bankrupted his own parents. Word travels on campus the way mold spreads in showers, slow at first, then everywhere. Professor Harper asked, gently, if I needed an extension on the semester project. When I said yes, she stared at my hands as though expecting them to shake. They did. I failed the project anyway, then the course, then the term. My GPA slid off the registrar's cliff face with the same sickening lurch as a car finding black ice. Financial aid vanished next, triggered by unsatisfactory academic progress. Without it, I couldn't cover dorm fees. The housing office taped a vacate notice to my door, hot pink as bubble gum. 72 hours. I stuffed 3 trash bags with clothes, one with textbooks I still hoped to reopen, and crammed everything into the Civic. Sleeping in a parking garage taught me the language of pipes. How each drip, each metallic moan marks a different hour. I measured nights by echoes instead of clocks. Friends tried calling at first. I let the phone buzz until the battery died. Explaining demanded words I didn't have. A story with a villain I refused to name because the only villain left was me. Eventually the calls stopped. Silence, at least, was consistent. Job apps blurred under cheap cafe Wi-Fi. No address, no references, no clean school record. Even fast food managers saw risk glowing off me like fever. I donated plasma twice a week for grocery store ramen, then sold blood-stained lecture notes online to freshmen who hadn't yet decided what ruins a life. Loneliness mutated into paranoia. Every pair of headlights behind me felt deliberate. Every cough outside the car a prelude to accusation. One rainy dusk a stranger yanked my door open, demanded cash, and punched the lily-stained seat when I showed empty hands. I tasted copper and asphalt and thought, at least someone finally landed a blow I deserve. That night, I wrote a goodbye email addressed to no one. If you ever find this, please tell them I never meant harm. I saved it to drafts because even despair needs witnesses, and I had none. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, considered the straight shot from pedal to exhaust pipe, wondered how many minutes carbon monoxide takes. But the key never turned. Something, cowardice, hope, stubbornness, froze my hand. Instead, I cracked the window and let the winter rain needle my face until dawn painted the horizon a bruised violet. I was $36 from starvation, 2 failing kidneys from another plasma session, and 1 exhaust fume away from ending the question of what if forever. Rock bottom, it turns out, isn't a single impact but a landscape, and I had only begun to map it. I thought the night would finish me, turn the Civic into a steel coffin, but dawn arrived with teeth and someone else's heartbeat. The morning after the exhaust pipe decision that never happened, I shuffled into the 24-hour laundromat across from the parking garage, chasing heat more than clean clothes. Fluorescent lights hummed like insects. I sank onto a plastic chair, hood up, pretending the duffel at my feet was laundry instead of my entire life. I was halfway through a cup of burnt vending machine coffee when a voice said my name. My full name, not the clipped version professors used. I flinched. Standing 2 washers away was Mara Ellison, a girl I'd once helped survive senior year calculus. She'd been the quiet type who drew constellations on her notebook margins. I'd forgotten those freckles across her nose but recognized the orbit's steady gaze. "Didn't expect to find you here at sunrise," she said, folding a stack of scrubs, hospital logo shining faintly. Mara was a third-year nursing resident, on break between graveyard shifts. She glanced at my swollen eye, courtesy of the would-be mugger, and the plastic bags slumped like surrendered flags. No judgment flickered, only assessment, the same clinical calm she probably used in triage. She offered a ride to her apartment to wash up, get actual coffee, maybe sleep somewhere that locks from the inside. Pride clawed at my throat, but exhaustion pinned it. I muttered something about being fine. Mara's answer was a shrug and a door held open. "Everyone gets 3 stupid refusals," she said. "After that, the offer expires." The casual countdown felt like the rope tossed to a drowning man. "You can flail or grab, your call." I grabbed. Her place was a shoebox over a deli that smelled perpetually of onions, but the shower pressure was heavenly. She lent me sweatpants, fed me eggs that tasted of pepper and mercy, and set clear boundaries. 3 nights, then we make a plan. "This isn't charity," she insisted, pointing a fork. "You tutored me for free. Call it interest. Breaking point, meet ally." Mara dragged me to the community outreach center where she volunteered. Wednesday mornings were resume clinics in a repurposed church basement. She slapped my coffee from the vending machine with real espresso and introduced me to Carol, a retired HR director who believed no employment gap was unspinnable. Carol pried the story for me in fragments typed while I spoke, then slid the screen around. Data analysis, inventory management, QuickBooks specialist. I almost laughed. She'd weaponized my failure into skills. Next came Marcus, the center's no-nonsense counselor. His office smelled of cedar chips and unasked questions. I sat through the mandated intake, arms crossed, until he said, "Guilt can be gravity. You can orbit it forever or burn up trying." The metaphor cracked something. I booked another session, then another, because talking to Marcus felt less like confession and more like mapping exit routes from a minefield everyone said was my fault. Mara's couch graduated to a futon in a shared sublet once I landed a part-time inventory position at a hardware warehouse. Heavy lifting, but steady. Nights I stacked pallets. Days I took online classes to salvage my credits. Paid in installments carved from each paycheck. The warehouse manager, a former Marine, drilled discipline by measuring productivity in millimeters. It felt good, almost holy, to be judged on the weight of boxes instead of rumors. Spring swayed into summer. For the first time since the porch stood empty, I woke without counting how much pain could fit inside a single breath. Mara and I swapped war stories over late-night ramen. Her difficult patience, my palate splinters. Somewhere between laughter and silence, I noticed the way she tucked loose hair behind her ear when listening, and the feeling scared me more than homelessness had. But healing is never a straight line. One humid evening, a letter arrived at the sublet. No return address, my name in handwriting I knew better than my own. The flap smelled faintly of cinnamon. My hands shook so hard the paper rattled. Mara touched my shoulder. "Open it when you're ready," she said, voice low. I wasn't ready, but I also wasn't the kid who let silence decide things anymore. I slit the envelope, and the past came flooding back, words blurring on tear-salted ink. When you've learned to live without a heartbeat, the first thud of hope hurts like a bruise you press just to be sure it's real. The envelope trembled between my fingers while Mara watched, coffee cooling beside her. Inside lay 3 sheets, no salutation, only paragraphs that read like someone talking to a wall they weren't sure would answer. Asterisk, we mortgaged the house again after the audit. The bakery folded, then the bank called the note. Your father believed prison was coming, and shame is a louder jailer than steel bars. We sold everything overnight and ran, telling ourselves it spared you the ruin we'd sown. Your mistake wasn't the numbers. It was our silence. We let fear rewrite the story until you were villain enough to blame. I've replayed that choice every night. Your father is in county medical, stage 4 lymphoma. Anna refuses to see him until we find you. If you never respond, I'll understand. But please know, the door you once called home is open, whatever its address. Asterisk. Below the signature, Mom had taped a dried sprig of cinnamon basil, her secret scone ingredient, so fragile it broke into my palm like dust from an old hymn. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was vertigo. I'd rebuilt an identity on the concrete assumption my family didn't want me. Now that pillar cracked and the whole architecture of survival listed sideways. Mara squeezed my shoulder. You don't owe them anything, she whispered. The problem was I still owed myself an answer to the question that had knotted every therapy session. What if the story is bigger than the hurt? 3 months later, I had savings scraped from double shifts, an associate degree 1 semester from completion, and a rental apartment that smelled of fresh paint instead of mildew. I'd learned to sleep 8 uninterrupted hours, to text Mara goodnight and feel a grin spread across my face before the phone chimed back. The world was no longer a minefield. It was new-poured asphalt. Sticky, scorching, but solid beneath my feet. Yet the letter pulsed in my desk drawer like a second heartbeat. Marcus asked, "What outcome feels like peace?" I said, "To stand in front of them and not collapse." He nodded. "Then the journey isn't about them. It's about testing the strength you already forged." So I booked a bus ticket to Roseburg, where County Medical sat on a hill overlooking the river, an old brick labyrinth that filtered afternoon sun through stained glass skylights. Mara wanted to drive me, but I needed the 7-hour ride alone, to tally every possible ending and decide I could bear them all. At the hospital reception desk, I gave my father's name. The nurse's eyes softened when she asked my relation. Saying son out loud felt like borrowing someone else's clothes. Loose in the shoulders, tight at the throat. She pointed me to oncology, room 214. Dad looked smaller than memory, bones tenting the blanket, for pump ticking like an anxious metronome. Mom sat bedside, grayer, thinner, but her eyes, storm cloud blue, flashed wide when she saw me. She half rose, lips forming my name, then faltered as if the syllables might shatter the air. Anna stood in the window's glare, arms around a cardboard box of bakery recipe cards. She met my gaze with a mix of dread and wild relief. The room smelled faintly of cinnamon. She'd smuggled in scones against hospital policy. No one spoke for a full minute. Finally Dad rasped, "I thought the least I could do was die guilty." His voice was gravel-coated in apology. I stepped forward, heart pounding like a jury's gavel. Mom whispered, "We were cowards." Anna's eyes pooled. A single tear darkened the recipe card on top. I set my backpack down. Inside were printouts. The corrected QuickBooks files, letters from the bank clearing fraud charges once the true audit surfaced. Proof that my error had been theirs too, compounded by fear. I'd spent months working with Carol and an accountant friend to untangle the mess. The debts were negotiated. The bakery's liens settled for pennies. I held the pages out. "We can still lose him," I said, voice cracking. "But we don't have to lose this." Dad tried to lift his hand. Tubes hindered him. I clasped it gently, beneath paper-thin skin. His pulse stumbled but persisted. Mom sobbed a raw, keening sound. Anna dropped the recipe box, cards scattering like autumn leaves. Forgiveness didn't pour over us in cinematic light. It hovered in the space between breaths, fragile as the cinnamon basil that had crumbled in my palm. But in that moment, everyone's shoulders lowered half an inch, as if a load had shifted to bearable. The oncologist stepped in to discuss treatment options. Dad would need a bone marrow match. Without thinking, I volunteered for testing. Mom protested it might be painful, success uncertain. I only shrugged. Pain, I'd learned, is sometimes the toll for crossing back into love. The decisions weren't final, the wounds not closed, but the conversation was no longer silence. That evening, I checked into a cheap motel by the river, texted Mara a photo of the cinnamon-stained recipe card, and wrote, "Not healed, but healing." She replied with a heart and a question mark. Yes, I typed, "Dinner when I'm back." I lay on the stiff mattress listening to the river gnaw the banks, feeling something inside knit together in rhythm with the water's hush. Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through. It's the ground that rises, inch by inch, to meet feet that once dangled over an abyss. Dad's marrow test came back a partial match. The procedure bruised my hips and left me hobbling like an old man for 2 weeks. But when his white cell counts began to climb, the soreness felt like a tithe I'd chosen willingly. He's still fighting, cancer makes no promises, but treatment now battles cells alone, not guilt. Mom reopened the bakery under a new name, Second Rise, in a strip mall 50 miles from the old cul-de-sac. She mails me experimental scones, lavender lemon, blackberry sage, each box stuffed with more apology than pastry. Anna transferred to nursing school. The photo taped above her dorm bed shows Mara and me flanked by hospital monitors, all 3 of us making rabbit ears over Dad's sleepy head. The legal wreckage took longer. Settlements erased most debt, but the house never returned, and the bakery survives month to month. I offered spreadsheets and after-hours hauling, not money. Marcus warned me that writing blank checks often buys silence, not healing. Instead, we meet on Sundays via video call, trading recipes, budget tips, bad jokes. The distance is deliberate, space enough for honesty to grow muscles before we test its weight in person again. Mara and I rent a place with sunlight in every room. Some evenings I still wake sweating. Certain I'll find the furniture ghosted away, her number disconnected. But she's always there, hair messy, asking if I want tea or to talk or both. Love, I've learned, is less a soft landing than 2 people agreeing to hold the net taut even when their arms shake. I still pass the old laundromat on late shifts. The plastic chair sits cracked, vending machine replaced by a sleek espresso bar. I leave spare change on the counter sometimes. A quiet tribute to the morning a stranger called my name like a rescue flare. What have I learned? Justice is rarely symmetrical. The scales tilt, spill, and we spend years gathering what's scattered. Family is both noun and verb. You are born into one, but you must choose again and again to family each other through failure. Shame grows in darkness. Drag a story into daylight, emails, ledgers, voices trembling but audible. And even the ugliest truth loses its power to deform you. Survival is transactional. Healing is relational. Plasma money bought noodles, but conversation paid for my return to myself. Do I forgive them? Some mornings yes, others not yet. Forgiveness, I found, is a muscle. Work it gently, rest it, let it tear a little, grow stronger in the scar. And me? Am I forgiven? Dad's washed-out smile when my marrow hit his veins felt like absolution. But the final verdict is mine to render. I'm learning to sentence myself to living. I keep the dried cinnamon basil in a glass vial on my desk. It crumbles more each time I move it, yet the fragrance lingers. Proof that even fragile things can persist, that memory can sweeten what nearly destroyed you. So here is my closing line, the one I could not write in that parking garage draft. They moved houses while I was away, but I built a home inside the space they're leaving left behind, and it follows me wherever I decide to stay.
If you made it this far, you're officially part of the drama. Subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done?